Trump's lawyer hiring Clinton's lawyer. This is significant. Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, who of course you know about, Michael Cohen, tonight I can tell you has hired Lanny Davis, a name you may recognize. He was a former top lawyer in the Clinton White House, a longtime friend and advisor to Hillary Clinton. You see there, one of many times they've come together, and he was a public surrogate for her campaign. So this move is the latest in Michael Cohen's very public evolution from a diehard Trump loyalist who kept all secrets and fixed all problems to what he's done lately, telling George Stephanopoulos this week that his, quote, first loyalty is now to his family. And tonight, Davis confirming to us at NBC News that he has been following this case, that he read Michael Cohen's words in that Stephanopoulos interview and, quote, recognized Cohen's sincerity. Michael Cohen deserves to tell his side of the story. And in a moment, I can tell you we'll have an exclusive live interview with Donald Trump's longtime personal lawyer, Jay Goldberg, who had Michael Cohen's job before Michael Cohen. But first, let's get into what this all means. Daniel Goldman is a former federal prosecutor who has worked in the actual office, the Southern District of New York, that is investigating Cohen. And David Corn, who's, of course, Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones and an expert on all things Russiagate, including some of the original leads in the Mueller probe that were farmed out to this federal probe in Manhattan. David, when you look at this, when you look at Michael Cohen's evolution and you look at Lanny Davis, someone you and I have crossed paths with as a lawyer and a Politico, what does it mean to you tonight?
Listen, Lanny Davis worked for the woman of whom the Trump crowd used to shout, lock her up. In fact, they may even shout it tonight at that rally he's holding out west. So to bring Lanny Davis into Michael Cohen's inner circle, inner sanctum. I mean, if you care about Donald Trump, you ought to be really worried because, yes, Lanny Davis is a lawyer. He will serve his clients' needs. He's also a political player, a spinmeister who's written books on how to spin, who has an agenda here, which is to avenge Hillary Clinton. So if it ever comes to his advice to Cohen on what to do, you can't separate his loyalty, his fierce loyalty to the Clintons and wanting to set things straight after the 2016 election with what he's going to be doing with Michael Cohen.
Right. You use the word loyalty, David, you know, to put a little bit of a Kendrick Lamar test on it. Can you think of anyone who is more loyal over more years to the Clintons, publicly and privately, than Lanny Davis?
Nobody. I remember going back to the 90s when they had the whole Senate investigation into Clinton campaign fundraising, and Lanny would come out every day and spin the media, spin the reporters there like myself covering this, and he would say the most ridiculous, ludicrous things that no one would buy, but he was out there doing the best he could to save his friends and serve his agenda, and now he's giving advice to Michael Cohen. I'm sure there's a good Godfather reference here. Give me a few moments and I'll come up with it, but it's stunning.
Well, I mean, you need to know your five families well, and Daniel Goldman, your office has prosecuted some of those over the years, but it is beyond switching families. It is going against the Trump family in no uncertain terms. And again, this is a very different message than we heard from Michael Cohen, who once said he was hoping that his links to Trump would be as personal lawyer, not for 4 years, but for 8. Take a listen to Trump describing their relationship and then Cohen describing it.
I'm going to be the personal attorney to Mr. Trump.
You have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Can I assume that in that role, not being a government role, that you'd have attorney-client privilege with President Trump?
Yes, of course. And that relationship hopefully will last, you know, for not 4 years, but 8 years.
The attorney-client privilege that's being suggested tonight is not between Cohen and Trump, but between Cohen and Hillary loyalist Lanny Davis.
For sure, and there are many different facets of this now. One for certain is that this is a continuation of Michael Cohen's separation from Donald Trump. Donald Trump used the past tense for Michael Cohen's representation of him a couple weeks ago. Now Michael Cohen has changed his Twitter profile to remove his title as personal attorney to Donald Trump. And it's a further continuation of Cohen going out on his own.
You're talking about right here on the screen. He went from personal attorney to Donald Trump on Twitter, which we know is a medium the president cares about, to right after Independence Day, just a link and removing that. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the continuation of what he was saying and to George Stephanopoulos. And it is the assertion that he's making that I'm going to figure out what is best for me, not what is best for Donald Trump. From a legal standpoint, there's an interesting angle to this as well, which is you have Guy Petrillo, who's a former Southern District of New York, chief of the criminal division. He ran all the prosecutors in that office. He is representing him. And now you have Lanny Davis, who is an incredibly experienced Washington insider. And what it tells me is that Michael Cohen is trying to gather as good a legal team as he can to fight a battle on two fronts, not necessarily fight, but to deal with a battle on two fronts. You have the Southern District, but we also know that Mueller is still looking into Cohen in connection with some of Cohen's activities with regard to Russians, either the Trump Tower Moscow or January 2017, delivering that Ukrainian peace plan to Michael Flynn's desk. And Lanny Davis is someone who may be able to deal with that Washington side of things with Mueller.
Right. What you're suggesting is a road to potential cooperation where Guy and people in New York can handle that deal?
Well, what I'm suggesting is that the first step, and Michael Cohen indicated that, I think, in his weekend interview, is he has to figure out what his jeopardy is, what his criminal exposure is, and then he's got to make a decision what to do. Right. I think what is clear from that interview is that Michael Cohen is going to do what's best for Michael Cohen, not what's best for Donald Trump.
Right. And that's why the public way that he's identifying himself is so significant. And as you say, any real lawyer strategy is not going to foreclose options. It's going to try to develop multiple options.
Right, and he needs now to understand both sides.
With that in mind, David, take a listen to the man who held the job that Michael Cohen had before him. Viewers of The Beat may remember Jay Goldberg is someone that we've always found interesting to talk to because he knows of what he speaks, both as a former federal prosecutor and a former Trump attorney. I'd spoken with him, and he'd said some things that seemed negative about Cohen. Take a listen.
Now, you have to ask yourself, and nobody has mentioned this, why is the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District investigating Michael Cohen? Why? Is it Russia? No. Is it labor racketeering? Yes.
Do you think the feds may have evidence that Michael Cohen fixed things, as you say, for Trump, for the mob?
I think that Michael Cohen regaled people with the fact that he was connected to mob influence.
Mob influence, that made a lot of headway at the time. I'm now joined exclusively and live by phone, Jay Goldberg, who, as I mentioned, worked for 15 years as Donald Trump's lawyer and says he maintains attorney-client confidentiality with the president as he continues to advise him. Thank you for making time on a night when this is the #1 story going on, Jay, which is what is Michael Cohen, a former Trump lawyer, up to? How do you view his hiring of these lawyers, including Lanny Davis?
Well, I don't think it means anything other than that he's in a cooperation mode. But you have to distinguish between cooperation and the reliability of the information that he imports to the prosecutors. He's savvy enough to know the kinds of information that the government is looking for, and the cases are replete with instances where people have shaded the facts in an effort to win the cooperation letter from the government that will enable the judge to give them a lesser sentence. So the fact that he's, quote, cooperating doesn't ensure that he'll be telling the truth. But I don't think there's any question that cooperation is the order of the day.
And if that's the case, Jay, I've got to ask you, if cooperation, as you put it, as someone who's intimately involved with some of the players here, if Michael Cohen is moving towards cooperation, how do you think Donald Trump should view Michael Cohen hiring someone so bound up with Hillary Clinton? You and I both know, and I think our viewers know, there are plenty of qualified lawyers to handle this case who are not deep Hillary Clinton loyalists.
Well, I think without speaking to Donald, I could safely say that he'd be disappointed in the way in which Michael has so clearly broken from the pact. somebody has brought him in from the cold, and I would expect that it's the chief of the criminal division. And the question now is not simply whether he'll cooperate, but whether we could be assured that he'll be telling the truth. After he decides to cooperate, he'll have to enter into what's known as a witness cooperation agreement. That's the kind of agreement that would require him to tell the truth, but it also bolsters his testimony because it indicates that the FBI has checked out what it is that he says and found it to be so. And this goes into evidence during a trial, and it's very harmful to the defense. But if the defendant is convicted, and there happens to be a lie told by the government witness, it's sort of winked away and not pursued. But
and I understand that, Jay. I understand that. I have one final question for you, and I take your point, and our viewers take your point in fairness, which is you, of course, have been loyal to Donald Trump, and you're saying it's possible there could be a scenario where people are being induced to cooperate, and they may provide material that is harmful to Donald Trump, but may not ultimately be 100% accurate, and you have every right to make that point. Let me close by asking you, is there anything else you think Donald Trump can do to limit his exposure here vis-a-vis his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, or has that train left the station, sir?
No, I don't think the train has left the station. I was very impressed in an article carried by the Washington Post, which indicates how shabbily Trump treated Michael Cohen. We want to build up at this point a basis to believe that there's hostility on the part of Michael Cohen towards Trump that would cause Michael Cohen to shade the truth. Anything that would support the credibility of Michael Cohen, any statement by Trump that would support the credibility of Michael Cohen as a good person or as a loyal person, would be counterproductive to the Trump camp.
I understand what you're saying. And, Jay, I always appreciate you coming on Lawyer to Lawyer. Jay Goldberg, making time for us on a night when lawyers are in the news. Thank you. Daniel and David Korn are still with me. David Korn, our viewers are, I think, fairly sophisticated, and they probably know that we sometimes get guests on this show who are speaking not only to me and the viewers, but to the president, which I think informs some of what we just heard. Your analysis, sir.
Well, I think he's right. I think, Trump certainly can't come out and say Michael Cohen's a great guy, because it seems like he's cooperating. The only thing that Michael Cohen has to cooperate with, to leverage, to bargain with, is information on either Trump or other members of the family, other members of the organization, and other enterprises. I mean, the list is really long. We don't have the time to go through all the possible things that Michael Cohen's being investigated for, but yet there are years of business deals in the Trump organization separate from what might or might not have happened with the Russia scandal that they could be interested in, too, in the Southern District of New York. Cyrus Vance nearly prosecuted Trump and his kids for fraud with the Trump Soho project, something that was done with Felix Sater, and Michael Cohen would have known information about that. I mean, Michael Cohen knows a lot. The only thing worse than having someone investigating you is having someone investigate your lawyer. And, if he's telling all, I imagine it's going to be, it only works for him if he tells the truth. If he doesn't tell stuff truthfully, then that whole agreement falls apart. So
let me go to Daniel on that.
People care about Trump.
As
should
someone
be
who's
worried about this.
In that office, Daniel, Jay Goldberg raising two core points there. One, maybe you don't believe a guy who's desperate and needs to shade the truth. And two, Donald Trump has no interest in resuscitating Michael Cohen's credibility right now.
Well, the second, I think, is absolutely right, now that he's broken from him, and whatever the reasons are that he broke from him, maybe because of Trump's activity himself, his conduct. But Jay brings up a good point, and that's why this process will take some time. In order for Michael Cohen to cooperate, he is going to have to meet with prosecutors and FBI agents for hours and hours and hours. And they're going to have to go through the 4 million documents they got from the searches of his apartment, home, and hotel, plus whatever other information they've gotten over the past several months. And they will confront him with those. And they will have them to check what he's saying to make sure it matches up. And ultimately, all of that other information and including other witness statements, will be what we call corroborating evidence. And they will not sign him up to a cooperation agreement unless other evidence matches up with what he's saying. So they're going to vet this and check this, and that's going to take a lot of time.
Unless they can land it. It's almost like you're suggesting they've done this before.
Once or twice.
Daniel Goldman and David Cohen on a very interesting set of developments. We did not expect Lanny Davis's name to come up like this, but we don't predict the news. We just report it. Thanks to both of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.